Welcome to Series 9, Episode 1 of In Suspense, a podcast and vodcast for fans and writers of crime fiction. I'm Lauren North, and my lovely co-host today is Nikki Smith. Hi, Nikki.
Hello, Lauren. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And we're back from a very short break. It didn't actually feel like a break at all. We've got a brand new series, and we have so many really exciting guests and topics for you coming up, I think, don't we? And it feels like we're really digging into commercial thriller writing in this series and creating that success. So that's exciting for us. And we're kicking off today chatting to none other than the sensational best-selling king of the high concept, Will Dean. And it's no surprise that our topic is delivering the high concept novel, which is very good. But first of all, Nikki, how are you and what have you been doing? Because last time we spoke at the end of the series 2 weeks ago, you were knee-deep in edits, as was I. So how are you and how are your edits?
Yes, I'm fine. Thank you very much, Lauren. You'll be pleased to hear that I have finally finished my structural edit. Hurrah! Which we're all cheering about, everybody. Which is, yes, it was a huge relief, and I finished literally just before the Easter kind of bank holiday weekend, which was great timing because it meant that I could have a few days off, which was the first time in as many weeks as I could remember. I think I'm one of those people, when I've got structural edits, I just need to get them done.
Oh, yeah.
And
kind of a
you're
break
in it, aren't you? It's kind of no break. It's very long hours. It's weekends. It's all of that. So so I was suddenly able to kind of tackle the vast piles of washing and admin that I just kind of left everywhere around the house. So yes, feeling a little bit more organised. And now I'm just thinking about ideas for the next book, whilst also managing the double whammy of GCSEs and A-levels that we have in my house this year. So yes, it's joyful and slightly stressful all round.
And when will that all be over? Will it be June? It's all happening in May.
June. I think both of mine actually finish on June the 16th.
Oh.
So yes,
it's not long to go,
no.
Is it? It's just going to be the next 6 weeks for you. It's going to be really tough, isn't
Exactly. Yes. Well, I think tougher for them than me, but yes,
yeah,
I'm there in the background.
Remember my mum finding it tough at all when I had mine, but at the same time, when my kids have it, I'm going to be so stressed for them. So like, it's a different generation, though, isn't it? Like, we're a lot more involved.
Yes. I think I was probably more stressed actually when my elder one did GCSEs, because that was COVID and the rules were just changing every 2 weeks. It was just awful. So that did feel really stressful. This time around, it doesn't feel so bad. It probably does. Well, obviously it does for them, but less so for me. And I'm just doing the kind of like, do you want anything testing? And can we get some food? And all of that kind of thing. Snacks? Anybody? Yes, that type of thing. Good. Yes. Yeah. So how about you, Lauren? What have you been up to?
I have been doing my structural edits as well, wasn't I? You and Leslie finished yours first, and I was about a week behind you. So I've done my structural edits for my next Elsie North book, which is exciting. So that's now back with the publisher. And then I've just done a really, really long 17-page plan for my next Lauren North book, and I've started writing that. So that's exciting. I think a really detailed plan, I hope, is going to really help me and make it a lot of a quicker process. So we'll see how that goes. Yes, I'm sort of just doing that, but my kids only went back to school today. We're recording this on Tuesday, aren't we, the 25th? And it's been like the longest Easter holidays ever. I don't know why it's happened this way. So yeah, and then they've got 3-4 day weeks, haven't they, the kids, because there's always so many bank holidays. So it's all a bit, I don't know, obviously I love them very much. I love spending time with them, but I also love working. So it's trying to find that balance, isn't it?
I think as well, we go in terms, don't we? I think that's the thing. It's like you organise to get a massive lot of work done in term time, so that it can, you don't have to do quite as much in the holidays. And when you've got these days where it's inset days and everything else, it all gets a bit like
I know. Yeah, I need to be But yeah, so it's all fine. So yeah, all good. I'm excited to just be writing again, which is good. And let's talk about our topic today. The high concept novel. So before we have Will on to talk about it, what does it mean to you, Nikki? What does it mean? What does high concept novel mean to you?
Well, I think that it means kind of having a hook for your book, which offers up a premise that initially seems almost impossible to achieve. So it kind of
Yeah.
draws the reader in, and it makes them think, well, how are you going to do that? So I think I was thinking of the example of Sophie Hannah's book, Haven't They Grown?
So good.
Which had the kind of premise that 12 years ago, Thomas and Emily were 5 and 3 years old. Today, the children don't look a day older. Why haven't they grown? And immediately it makes, I think, the reader's brain start going, well, how can that happen? Why can that be? And so you kind of drawn in to pick up the book to make that you read it. It gives the readers, I guess, a question that, they're desperate to know the answer to, so they want to read your book. What do you think, Lauren? Do you think
No, I completely agree. That's exactly, I think, what a high concept novel is. And I think it's just constantly trying to find that high concept novel that is so tricky. And it's that buzzword, isn't it? It was gripping thriller about 5 years ago, wasn't it? Now it's high concept.
Yes.
And I don't think all the high concept ones we're hearing about are high concept, and they're still amazing premises. But like you say, Sophie Hannah's Haven't I Grown, and Will Dean's The Last Passenger, which we're going to talk about, it just are so unbelievable that they just immediately, you have to know what's going on. Even before you've picked up the book, you have to know.
Yes. And I think the danger is, isn't it, that you've then got to deliver. That's the problem.
That's what I want to ask him about, because the last thing you want to do is the reader get to 20,000 words and go, well, mate, I'm not bothered now. Where is this gone? And it's all about, I listened to Sophie Hannah the other day on a podcast, and she was saying, like, it's all about, I can't remember what she called it, almost like the expectation for the reader, like almost like a contract you're putting with the reader. Like, they have an expectation of what you're going to deliver to them, and you have to deliver it or they will be disappointed. And it doesn't matter what the genre is, that's what you have to deliver. So I think that's important for a high concept novel. But yes, maybe we should get Will Dean to talk to us about it and see what he says.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
All right. Welcome, Will, to In Suspense.
So welcome, Will, to In Suspense, in your Swedish Forest cupboard. And before we dive in with our questions about your sensational new book, The Last Passenger, of which I have a copy, I think, behind me here, but just so that our readers can see it. Very clever cover indeed. We thought you could introduce yourself to our listeners, please.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. Like you said, my name is Will Dean. I live in off-grid in a Swedish forest. So right now, where I'm talking to you from in this cabin, I can walk for about a full day in any direction. I'm still in the same forest. I haven't really seen anybody or anything apart from trees and maybe a moose. And we've been here now over a decade. And I've been a full-time writer since 2018. I write the Tuva Moodyson series, which is a kind of Twin Peaks, Stephen King style series with a deaf protagonist set in Sweden. And I also write standalone books. The Last Thing to Burn was my firstborn was my second, which is kind of difficult to say. And then The Last Passenger is the new one. I'm from the East Midlands, and I grew up with no books in the house. And I grew up being the weird kid because I was quite nerdy and shy and bookish, and I only really got comfort from books and from nature. And I'm basically that same person now, just 45 years later. And my family thought I was odd, and I thought I'd be a reader. My whole life I was very content being a reader. I was a voracious reader. My mum, bless her, would take me to the mobile library, and I would get out lots of books. I read Stephen King too young, like most of us did, and I thought I'd be a reader. I never expected to be a writer. I did like a lot of normal, proper jobs, and then in my mid-late 30s, I started to think, well, maybe I could write a book, and now I'm kind of hooked.
That's very interesting. Yes, I had the mobile library experience as well, actually. And I think what you haven't mentioned is that you've had several novels shortlisted for some amazing awards, including Lauren's favourite, The Last Thing to Burn, which was shortlisted for Thriller Book of the Year at the Fingerprint Awards 2022 and Crime Novel of the Year at the Theakston Old Peculiar Awards in 2022, and the Books Glass Bell Award. So, yes, full of accolades. And your latest novel, The Last Passenger, is out in ebook, hardback, and audio, I think on the 11th of May. And it's been described as a nerve shredding thriller, which I would have to agree with. I read it over 2 nights. It was one of those books that is incredibly difficult to put down. Each time you think that there's going to be kind of a pause in the action, you ramped it up a bit, and it's got an utterly brilliant premise, which I'm going to let you tell all our listeners about. So do you want to tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, sure, Nikki. Thank you for all of that. Normally I find it really difficult to sum up a book in a couple of sentences. I think most of us do, but like with this is the first book where I can actually give it a The Last Passenger. The main character is called Kaz. She's a 50-year-old cafe owner from Doncaster. She's never really been on holiday before. She takes a trip on the RMS Atlantica, an ocean liner, and she's going to travel from the UK to New York with her new partner, Pete. They board the ship. They have a great first night. They go out for dinner. They walk the decks. They go for cocktails. They go back to their cabin. The next morning, she wakes up and he's not there. Pete's gone. She checks the balcony. He's not there. She goes into the bathroom. He's not there either. She walks out into the corridor and all the other cabin doors are wedged open and they're unoccupied. And so she walks around the whole ship and she realizes she's steaming into the mid-Atlantic and she's the only passenger on board.
Wow. I mean, that is high concept, isn't it? I really loved it. Like Nikki said, it was like every time you're like, oh God, this is awful. You're like, oh, something else has happened and it's even worse. And there's just so much danger and trouble you can have on a cruise liner going across the Atlantic Ocean. So it was absolutely amazing. Such a great read as well. And we are talking a little bit more about the high concept novels in a bit, but can you start by telling us a little bit about where the idea for The Last Passenger came from?
Yeah, sure. The idea came, all of my ideas really come from like just an image that comes to me normally just as I'm going off to sleep. And a lot of these, most of them are nuts and will never be anything. But in this occasion, I saw a woman walking or kind of jogging around a vast cruise liner, kind of QM2 style, big ocean liner. And I didn't really know what she was running, if she was running away from someone. But then I realized there's nobody else on the ship. This vast metallic beast of a vessel going through rough seas, and she's questioning her own sanity because everyone's disappeared and she doesn't know how to find out answers. We're so used to being able to check our phones to get an answer. She can't do that, and she wants to know what she's worried about. Pete, she's also worried about her family she's left back home. There's that idea of like travel anxiety that we all have when we go away somewhere. It's exciting to be somewhere, but we also like worry about our mom or our sister or our kid or our dog or something. That's where the idea came from. Like, I wanted to know what's happened, but didn't have a clue what the reason was, and I didn't know what would happen from that point onwards when she's running around these decks. And then when I have an idea like that, it takes me 6 months or a year to kind of visualize the whole story or most of the story. So that's where it came from. And I think the seed of this came from lockdown. Like the first lockdown, like March 2020. I think I saw on YouTube or on Twitter a little clip of a drone footage over a cruise ship. There were like 4 or 5 of them, moored together off the coast of some island in the Caribbean. And that looks really weird. And each ship had just a few people on it, kind of looking after it. And this drone was flying around the decks, but also through some of the big ocean lobbies. And it just looks so eerie because we imagine a cruise ship and you think there's like 3, 4, 5,000 people on these things. You never see them empty. It freaked me out, it scared me, and that's where it all starts from.
Yeah, it certainly was scary. Can I just jump in and ask a follow-up? Because you said it took you about 6 months to a year to visualize it. When you're visualizing your novels, do you like write down notes and stuff? Do you have post-its on your wall? Do you actually plan it, or do you just keep it all in your head?
I try and keep it in my head. That's for a few different reasons. So I like to think through key scenes and try to walk around the ship in my own imagination every night before I go to sleep. And like when I'm driving, when I'm walking Bernie in the woods, I'm trying to think through how it feels So it's not so much I'm thinking about the plot or like act 1, act 2, or whatever happens in the plot. It's more I'm just trying to get a sense of the place and how Kaz feels in different rooms and on different days on the voyage. And I'm just trying to get a feel for it. I want to inhabit that character. And I find that if I write things down, Stephen King scared me with so many things, but he scared me in on writing. He says, if you write down too many notes, you can make it all a bit too rigid. And you can actually kind of eternalize bad ideas if you write them down, because you kind of just assume, okay, it's written down, it has some authority now, I'm going to keep it. Whereas if I keep it all in my head, in my imagination, then it's quite fluid. It gives me the confidence to start, because I need some confidence to start, because I'm always terrified it's all going to collapse like a house of cards. It's going to fall apart, career over, you know, it's all going to just writer's block for 25 years. This is going to collapse. So it gives me the confidence, but then it's really, really loose. So when I start writing, I can go off in a completely different tangent if that feels organic.
That's really interesting, because I think I totally get what you say about having the confidence to start, but I think for me it comes from the other way around. If I've got something written down, even if I don't necessarily stick to my plan, the fact that there's something on paper, as you say, it gives me the kind of confidence to go, okay, well, it's there now, it's there, and I can change it, but there's something written down. So yes,
I love that. I love that all of us writers do it in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And that's why I love like pods like yours, because it's so interesting to hear how other writers do it.
Yeah.
And we all have these weird superstitious ways of just getting through this ridiculous process that we go through.
Yes.
And you were saying about the post-it notes on the walls. I went a step further with this one, because I was planning on taking the QM2 to New York, have lunch with my editor, and then come back. And that would be my research trip. And my accountant signed off on this. My accountant was like, I think we can get this through. This is fine. Yeah. If you're going to write a book set on an ocean liner, this is okay. And then the second lockdown happened, and all the cruise ships were just like, we're done. We're going to close down for 2 years. So what I did is I bought loads of secondhand books and brochures from ocean liners. And I used a razor and I cut out all the pages and I wallpapered my office with them. And I put some of them on the ceiling even. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't good. It didn't look good. And then each day before I started writing, I could just stand at this wall. And a lot of it was technical, boring stuff like the engine rooms or the carpentry rooms, the waste management rooms, the food stores, the lifeboats. And that would it would help me kind of be immersed so I could start writing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Oh yeah, a lot of well, you can tell a lot of research went into it from reading it. And I was also going to say that it's quite a dark book, isn't it, Will? I mean, Last Thing to Burn was also quite terrifying for most of it, actually. But for this one in particular, I just didn't know where you were going to go with it at certain points. It's very, very clever. And so without I don't want to give away any of the plot, but did you, when you were talking about how you kind of came about the idea, did you have any idea of the twists that you were going to put in from the beginning, or do they kind of come along as you plan?
Great question. I have like some idea of things. I have a vague idea, but often some of the things that happen in this book, I had no idea they were coming. And some of them kind of scared me as they popped into my head, because they would come to me maybe 2 days before I got to that scene.
Oh, cool.
And I would suddenly be like, oh my God, that's coming. I find that really exciting, because as writers, like we're little nerds in a little room telling ourselves a story, and that giving yourself a buzz or a scare, a little scare is it gets me through the day. It's exciting.
It's the best part about writing, isn't it? I think it's the unexpected things that you can think, oh yeah, that's really good. I hadn't thought of that before.
Excuse me for coughing. I agree. And I love the fact that you can sometimes surprise yourself. And like you said about dark fiction, like I like unsettling fiction. I like fiction that makes you go, oh, there's something wrong here. I'm not sure what it is. And I like to be able to, if I can, I like to try to be able to set that mood without violence, without anything gratuitous, just like a Hitchcockian feeling of tension and suspense. I think that's really powerful. That's what I love to read, so that's what I aim.
Fantastic. And did you watch videos? I know you couldn't go on the boat, but have you watched like videos of them, and to kind of
Below decks.
yeah, yeah, yes.
I watched like an unhealthy amount of video footage. Yeah, not below
Okay.
deck, but I watched like a lot of technical stuff, like just like an electrician on an ocean liner in the Philippines taking you on a little tour through where he works, 4 decks below where any passengers ever see.
Wow.
And I'm just really interested. Yeah, I'm really interested to see that. And the crew cabins, these crew, sometimes there's 2 of them on shifts. They have a tiny little cabin, and they have no window, obviously, and they don't even have a porthole. They have like a picture of a porthole and a bunk bed, and they have no personal space. And it's so interesting to see that world, and that helps me layer up the authenticity. It makes me feel like, okay, I understand, like, how does the bridge work? How do you drive a boat this big? I'm fascinated by that. And how does a lifeboat actually work? What does it feel like to be on a lifeboat? So yeah, I did a lot of research into that, and that was really interesting. I didn't know, so it was fun.
That does sound interesting. Now this is your second book that I've read of yours, Will, because I obviously read The Last Thing to Burn, which I recommend to everybody when they're like, oh, what thriller shall I read next? I'm like, have you read The Last Thing to Burn? It's described as a word of mouth sensation, and I can see why. And I read it in a day, actually, which is something I don't normally do. And The Last Passenger for me was equally engrossing. And I just wondered how long it sort of takes you to write a full first draft.
Thank you for recommending it to people. I really appreciate that. The word of mouth thing is interesting because, sorry, this is deviating from your question a little bit. But I went to my grandma's funeral last week, and it was a beautiful day. It was not a sad occasion. She had a really long, good life, and it wasn't unexpected. So it was a beautiful day. And the vicar, who I didn't know, this old guy, came up to me, lovely old guy, just before the service, and I expected him to say, I want you to sit in this pew, or we're going to do this hymn or something. And he started talking about The Last Thing to Burn and how he read it in a day and all this. And I was like, this is really weird to be hearing this just as we're going into the church. But it was nice to hear that he had a different angle on it than most people. He was like, yeah, my bishop is really is very involved with modern day slavery and working in that field. And he had like a totally different angle. He was coming at it a lot from like, it's fascinating because he sees some of the victims of these kind of crimes and works with those communities in some ways, and also works with like farmers in isolated fenland locations. So really interesting to hear from him. Sorry, what was the question? I've completely gone off the rails.
I've completely forgotten as well. I could just listen to you talk about it, word of mouth all day.
How long does it take?
How long does it take to write? That's it.
Okay, I'm not very efficient. I'm like quite efficient and really inefficient at the same time. So a book takes me about 3 or 4 years from idea to publication, but I have at least one book come out a year. And how I do that is that I have an idea. It takes me about a year, 6 months to a year to visualize the story, to feel like I understand the setting and the mood and the atmosphere, the time of year, the main character, all of that. That takes about a year. And then I normally do a few months of research after that point, which I go quite deep on as well. But I'm a functioning human at this point. And I'm also like working on edits for the next book, as you know, and on proofreads for the next book.
And publicity, presumably, as well.
Yeah, exactly. I fly normally about once a month to somewhere or other. And then I carve out a month or 6 weeks for a first draft in my calendar.
You're really quite slow. And then when you come to it, it's just everything you live and breathe.
Yeah, that's really well put. Exactly like that. So I'm very slow, and I let it develop very naturally. So when I'm driving and I'm visualizing, I'm probably driving really badly. When I'm walking my dog, I'm visualizing the story. And then I'll carve out this 6 weeks for a first draft. I don't know exactly which day I'm going to start on. I'll give myself a little bit of flexibility on that, and I'll say to my publicist, "I'm sorry, I'm not doing anything that month. I'm going to say no to everything, whatever it is, and I don't do any traveling, and I don't do anything apart from write the book and like family stuff, because I can't ignore my family, No. So I have to still do the washing up and pick up my kid from school and do all that, but I'm not very mentally there. I'm very mentally absent at that month, and then what I do is I'll have this sense of like terror and excitement that I'm going to start writing this book. that I've been living with for a year. Like, it's really exciting, and it might collapse. And then one day when I'm ready, I'll write the first line, and that's all I write that day. That's my way in, and that hardly ever ends up being the first line, but it gets me in. And then the next day I'll write one chapter, and then I'm into the voice of my main character for the first time. That's a really special thing. And then the next day I'll write 2 chapters, and then from that day onwards I'll write 2 chapters without fail. So I won't skip a day. I'll write 7 days a week for about 3 to 5 weeks. Last thing to moment is 3 weeks. Most of the books are like 4 to 5 weeks. And at the end of that period, I've written the book. It's like 70 to 100,000 words, and I'm exhausted. As you guys know, it's very exhausting, and I always feel like I'm holding up this imaginary world on my shoulders, and it could fall on my head at any time. And all these characters, it's so difficult to hold up. It's exhausting. And then at the end of it, I come out of my zombie state. I have like a couple of days of just chopping wood, and then I have to go off to an event somewhere, and I have to do copy edits. And as you guys know, you have all these responsibilities, different stages in the book process. And then I put it away for about 4 months, lock it in a drawer, work on the other books. And then after 4 months, when I read it, I'll normally have like 3 or 4 days to read it. And it'll be like reading someone else's book, honestly. It's like I write it in such a weird fever dream state that it's like reading a book. I mean, obviously I know what the book is about and I remember a lot of it, but some of it I don't remember at all. And I have enough distance from it then to be quite brutal and start rewriting it. But like, if it's got 58 chapters in those 3 weeks when I write it, then the final book will have probably 57 to 59 chapters. Yeah. And all those chapters will be roughly as I wrote it, but it'll still take me like a year to do rewrites. Just because I find it hard, honestly. I find it difficult. I probably do 10 rewrites now for each book. I used to do maybe 20. And each rewrite for me has 2 stages. The first stage is I read the whole manuscript and I make notes on a pad. Then the second stage is on my computer, I'll implement all those changes. Yeah. And then I start on the next rewrite. So it's a very, like, per hour, it's a ridiculous process. I spend too long on each book, but it's the only way I can do it. So.
Everyone's got their way, haven't they? And you can't, it doesn't matter if someone says, "Oh, try it this way," like, you've got your way and that's how you do it.
100%.
Yeah, totally. Now, our topic for today is delivering the high concept novel. And I think with this novel, The Last Passenger in particular, you're definitely, we can call you the king of the high concept novel, Will. So I thought we'd start by asking, what does high concept mean to you?
This is a really interesting subject. So I think high concept basically means you can kind of sum up the story in a sentence or 2. So I think, imagine like man builds dinosaur park with inadequate fencing. That's what it is. And it's the same with Alien, with Jaws, with most Spielberg movies, but it's also the same with things like The Road by Cormac McCarthy or Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Like, it's just one of those things where for me, I'm not going to have every book be a high concept book because I just don't have those ideas. I have 1 every 5 might be high concept. And I think if you force it, readers can tell, okay, you just tried to come up with a high concept idea. But if it comes naturally, I think you just got to kind of hang on to it and hope that it's going to turn into something that makes sense.
Yes, Lauren and I were talking a bit before you came on, Will, and we were saying that it's also, I think, it's to do with the premise being seemingly impossible to the reader. I think it's not just that, like all those books that you talked about, they all have brilliant hooks, but there's something about particularly the high concept ones that you're posing a question, I think, to the reader that they just think, well, what? No, that doesn't make sense. How is this going to happen? So
that's a very good point. That's very true. I mean, this is the first book I've written where my 9-year-old keeps coming up to me and like, "Daddy, what happened to all the people?"
Yeah.
He doesn't do that with the other books. So that's how if you've written a high concept book, is if a kid is interested in what happened or why it happened.
Yeah, that's so true. In fact, I run all my ideas past my teenage son because he's really like black and white and really very mathematical. And so if I can give him an idea and he's like, well, what happens? Then I know, as you say, like I've hooked him. Like, whereas if he's like, oh, I don't get it, you're like, oh, okay, back to the drawing board then.
Yes.
Exactly. I should also say I'm definitely not the king of high concept. I would say I'm an apprentice.
Oh.
Maybe when I'm 72, I'll be something else. But like right now, I'm just constantly terrified. Honestly, that's how I feel most of the time. Is that the whole narrative will come tumbling down, and I'll be like, this doesn't make any sense, and lose all confidence. So it was very exciting writing a high concept book for the first time.
I think we all feel a bit like that in a sense, don't we? I think you're on the outside looking in on someone else, you think, oh my God, they're at the top of their game and look what they're doing, isn't that amazing? And they're just killing it left, right and center. And if it's you that you're just like, no, I'm just doing my job and I don't know what I'm doing and don't look at me, oh my God, it's awful. So it is a really interesting how we all see each other, I think. I wondered, obviously you have written several books now, you're on a one a year train, as we all are. At what point do you loop your agent and editor into the conversation? Do you wait until you've got it, like the whole book first draft written, or do they want to know what your next idea is? Like if you've got a one book deal, do you have to give them an idea for book two? Because that's, for you, sounds really awful because you keep them all in your head and don't like, I can imagine you not wanting to tell them.
That's an interesting question. This is kind of a behind the curtain question, isn't it? I don't know. I'm probably quite annoying for my agent and my editor, honestly, because they don't really know what they're getting until I deliver it. Honestly, they haven't got a clue most of the time. Like I do, normally my book deals are 2-book deals. So the first book, they'll know roughly what it is because I've written like a half-page pitch like we all do. But often it's quite different in the end to what that says. But the second book, they have no idea. Like with The Last Passenger, my editor, Joe Dickinson at Hodder, who's amazing and very wise and very smart, she was like, I gave her that little 2-line pitch and she was like, oh, this sounds so exciting. And then she was like, are you writing science fiction now? I was like, no, don't worry, I wouldn't do that to you. So yeah, I think they're always a little bit scared of what's gonna drop into their email inbox, but I honestly can't tell them yet. I can't tell them at the early stage because ideas are so fragile. And I would, again, if they started questioning it or asking questions, I'd be like, yeah, you're right, this makes no sense, I'm not going to write this book, scrap it, I'll write a book next year instead. So I don't share it with anyone, not even my wife. She's my first reader, but I'm very like protective of it, look after it and let it grow at its own pace, because that confidence is so like ephemeral and fragile. So I don't want to ruin it. And I know some authors who go through and find detail with their agent, like this is going to be the structure of the story, this is the hook, this is what I want to achieve out of this book, and I have no idea what any of that. So no, I'm very haphazard, really. I'd also say, I should say that's not a good way to have a career either, because I think my editor has a hard time, because every one of my books is very different to the one that went before.
Yes.
That's not smart. Like if I was thinking strategically, you should build this brand with a very similar books, but I just can't do it. I'm still that little weird kid writing stories that excite me, and I'm not gonna
it's interesting that you say that, because I think you're right. And I think we were talking about this off air, just about something else entirely, weren't we, Nikki, about how you have to build your brand. But I think in a sense your brand is, you're going to be entertained and you're going to be blown away, and so you have earned the right to have that flexibility.
And also it's not like, as you say, it's not like you're switching to science fiction or romance or something like that. There's still this kind of undertones of kind of darkness with whatever you write, and which is a kind of key themes, I think, in your book.
That's true. It just gives like my marketing team a real headache. But I think they say that it's like you're going to always have intense fiction.
Yes, exactly.
That intense thing is kind of it, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And so with high concept being quite a kind of buzzword, I think, in publishing at the moment, do you feel a kind of certain amount of pressure to keep delivering on ideas that fall into that category?
I really don't, I don't, because I can't. If I start thinking about pressure in any way, like awards or sales or anything, all that stuff, then I think I'd just collapse in a heap. I think
Yes.
it's good to distance yourself from that stuff. And 20 years ago, 30 years ago, authors didn't know how all these things worked. You were really insulated from it. There was no social media, and your agent would just send you a photocopy of your good reviews or whatever. And that was a good time to be. So I try and recreate that now. So no, I don't really feel any pressure. I feel the only pressure I feel, I would say, is to like write books that will be satisfying reads for my readers.
Yes.
I don't want to shortchange them with something that I rushed. I don't want to write something that's unsatisfying. Yeah, that's all. If I do that, I feel like everything else will just work out in time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that, I mean, obviously this, The Last Passenger has got this big kind of high concept premise behind it. So when you were writing it, you obviously said that, you do need to feel that you need to deliver for your readers. And so did you have any idea how you were going to kind of solve the question that you posed at the beginning of that book?
I had the ideas came like during that
Yeah.
visualization process. I knew some of it, but a lot of it I didn't know at that point.
Okay.
I feel like if I visualize it enough over and over again, and I do enough research, and the ship feels real to me in this case, and Kaz feels real to me, then everything else will just slowly unfold. And then 10 rewrites later, hopefully it will make sense, Yes. But I don't like with the high concept thing. This was so much fun to write a high concept book, but I also love low concept books. I should say that. Like the two Bermudison books are very low concept. Like it's a young deaf reporter in a weird little Twin Peaks town solving murder mysteries. And I love lots of low concept books where it's just like all about the setting, the sense of place and the mood and the characters. And there isn't so much of a huge plot. So no, I don't feel any pressure. I feel the only thing I need to do is write the best book I can each time.
Yeah. And I think you're going to answer the same question to this actually. What advice would you give to an author listening who is trying to come up with that high concept idea and deliver on it?
Don't try and come up with a high concept idea. I think if a high concept idea comes to you and it feels exciting, then run with it, see where it goes. And often it doesn't go anywhere. And if it goes and it's like still exciting you months after, years after, then that's going to be a book. And I think Stephen King writes something about like ideas being like skeletons hidden everywhere, and they're already there, and you have to go along and put the work in to excavate them. And you start excavating with like a JCB, and then you end up with a little brush when you're rewriting, and it's kind of like that. You can't force it too much, you know. And if you do, you can tell, readers can tell. So I think it's just about writing what gives you a buzz.
Now, before we go, we love to ask our guests what they've been reading lately and if they've got any books they'd like to recommend. So, Will, have you read anything that you'd like to recommend?
Yeah, I've got a few books here actually on my table. So I'm reading this right now, All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Crosby, which is wonderful. It's like Southern Gothic, noir, brutal, beautiful, operatic crime fiction. It's brilliant.
I've heard good things about that, actually. Yeah,
it's so good. It's so good. I met Sean at Capital Crime last year. Lovely guy, and I read his 2 earlier books. Actually, I think this was his first book, but it's coming out again now. And I recommend all of his books. They're brilliant. If you enjoy like True Detective Series 1, this is the book for you.
Yeah,
I'm also reading this at the moment.
So that's Open by Andre Agassi. So that's his autobiography, is it?
That's it. It's really intense.
Yeah,
reminds me a little bit of like sportsmen, comedians, authors. We all have these parallels, and the way he's training is a little bit like our unhealthy kind of training to go into a first draft. Similar. I'm also rereading this, talking about
Station 11.
That's one of my favorite.
I've still not read that, and I
so
get nightmares if I have anything to do with dystopian end of world apocalypse. So I have avoided it so far, but everyone raves about it.
I think it's okay, if you Like it's not as bleak as The Road or something like that. It's
It's just,
quite
I don't know
beautiful.
what it is. It's just like anything about, and zombies as well. It just triggers my imagination. I have it's like not nightmares, but maybe like really intense dreams. And it's just not good for my sleep.
I know.
Maybe
I kept
skip
telling
that
you to
one.
watch The Last of Us, didn't I? And
I
Lauren
was
was
like,
going,
no,
no, I'm not watching that. Yeah.
I'm also reading Mark Billingham, The Last Dance,
Oh
right now,
yes,
Yeah.
lovely.
which is a real tonic because it's a brilliant crime novel written by someone who writes crime so well, but also it's really funny and lighthearted, and you need that sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm also rereading on audiobook in the car Forensics by Val McDermid.
Oh, great. Yeah, I do love to have something going on that's slightly different with the audiobook.
Okay.
Yeah. And as someone who writes a series of crime novels, it's good to revisit like the science of forensics and stuff, because I'm not very well educated on that. And she presents it in such a human way. It's very accessible.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
really good. What about you, Nikki? What are you reading?
I've been lucky enough to read the first draft of Lauren's next book, her next LT North book, which was fabulous, but I can't say anything about that. So all I can say is that. And then I have just finished reading this,
Oh yes, I'd
which
like
is
to read that.
Lizzy Barber's new one, Nanny Wanted, which is brilliant. Set in Cornwall, so lovely location, and it's kind of about the implosion of a family when a new nanny arrives, which was, I really enjoyed that. And I've also just finished, which you probably can't see
Oh yes,
on the
Conviction
screen,
by Jack
Conviction
Jordan,
by
yes.
there we go, Conviction by Jack Jordan,
Yep.
which is great. That again is it's kind of, I guess that's a high concept premise about a barrister who is supposed to defend somebody called Wade Darling, who is accused of murdering his family. But she gets a visit from somebody on the very early on in the process who says that she has to throw the trial. And it's kind of how she deals with that. And yeah, it's good. It's very pacey. Yeah, really
and so much research goes into his novels as well, doesn't it? Like I want to know what career he's training for next, because he's done doctors, he's done lawyers. So I want to know like what's going to be next.
Yes.
Jack
You
Jordan.
do feel, actually, I mean, like you were saying, well, about watching videos of electricians working in the bottom of boats, and I think as an author you do feel, after you've written a few novels, God, I could do that, I could be a heart surgeon, I could do this. It's
easy.
Done so much research on it. Yes.
There would be a huge death count if I was a heart surgeon. That's for sure.
No, be fine. How about you, Lauren? What are you reading?
And so I just finished reading The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I absolutely loved. And we did a buddy read, really, didn't we, Nikki? Although you're a bit quicker than me. And so I read your 2024 book and you read my 2024 book. So that was really good. So I've just finished reading yours as well. And that was brilliant. I'm not allowed to say anything about it either. And The Last Passenger as well, which I just finished at the weekend, which blew me away. And then the other one is on my audiobook, and it's by Trevor Wood, and it's called Nowhere to Run. Is that what it's called? Like I was just like
you can
looking behind me trying to find the title. So I was like,
it's called You Can Run.
You Can Run. Brilliant. It is phenomenal. I'm halfway through and I'm really loving it. So that's a really good one. But yes, that's me.
Yes.
That's my books.
So
thank you for that. My TBR list has just grown.
Oh, I know. Yeah,
so
it always does. When you listen to other people talk, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to get that. I need to read that. I need to read that. Yeah, yes, no, yes, too much, not enough time. But yes, so sadly, I think that is all we have time for today. So thank you so much, Will, for joining us and talking about your books and writing. The Last Passenger is out on the 11th of May, and it's an absolutely fabulous read. So do grab a copy for anyone who's listening or watching.
Yes, do find out why there's only one passenger left on the cruise ship. And we're back in 2 weeks with Amanda Reynolds about her latest novel, The Assistant, and writing for the modern reader. So tune into that one.
Which leaves me with the final task of saying goodbye. So goodbye from Will.
Thank you so much for having me. Goodbye.
No worries. Goodbye from Lauren.
Goodbye.
And goodbye from me. Goodbye.